Welcome to Smalltalk Daily for Friday, October 3rd, 2008. This morning I'd like to go through how to add file references directly into an application, either by using URLs that are already extant on your web server or in a self-contained way in the Seaside server. Let's start with the former and go in here to our application, bring up a browser, and we'll go down to our root UI. So we're going to go to blog root UI. We're going to find the render content on method, and what I'm going to do is add an image reference here. So taking the HTML argument, I say I want an image brush, and I hand the brush an URL, and then this is one you can use as well because it's just on our CINCOM Smalltalk server. CINCOMSmalltalk.com/images/y.jpg. And if I accept that, and now I go back out to my browser and hit my entry point, I should see that show up, and I do. So that's one way of doing it. And assuming that this is a directory served by your web server, Apache, IIS, what have you, you can put relative URLs there, you can put whatever you want. Now that's fine for putting things up in your application. What if you wanted it in a more self-contained way inside Seaside? Well, the way you do that is you define a new class, and the kind of class we're going to define is called a file library. So I'm going to define blog file library, and I'm going to descend this from seaside.wa file library. Now I'm not going to add any instance variables, I'm just going to hit OK on that. Now I have to do a little configuration on that because I have to tell this thing what to find and where to find it. Let's go back out to the top so we can go through configuration. And what I'm going to do is hit config. I'm going to scroll down, and I want to add an entry point. And I want to call this images. And I'm going to say the images is of type files, and I'm going to add that. Okay, and now it's going to ask me, well, what kind of thing do you want? I'm going to want blog file library to be the thing that's added to that, so I'm going to hit configure on that. Now at this point, I can either add individual files, and I can do that this way, browse, and it'll bring up my file browser here. And in the directory I'm in, I want to select this directory and this particular file, which is the y.jpg. You notice I have a directory structure with that in it. Hit open, and now I can go ahead and close this after doing the add, and there it is. So I can remove it, I can rename it, I can do whatever I want. Now having configured that, let's go ahead and look at what that did. So let's click off and on, and you see what it did is it added this directly in the image with YJPG. Now you might wonder how you reference that in your application, and that's actually pretty simple. Let's go back to blog root UI, and we'll go to the rendering, and we'll change this from this direct URL reference here to blog file library slash, and it's sort of a pseudo URL kind of syntax here, and we put a symbol, and we call this YJPG, just like it is in the image. And now with that compiled, we can now go back out to our top level again, and let's go out to Seaside, hit our entry point, and there it is again. Now, it may be the case that you're wondering at this point, okay, it looks kind of tiresome to add a whole ton of files if I want to have a self-contained image. You know, what if that directory had not one file in it, but 5,000? Well, it turns out that there's a programmatic way of doing this. So what I can do is I can take a workspace, and I can come down here to the bottom, and I can type in programmatically, take blog file library, add all files in, and just hand it the path. In this case, it's just sblog. So let's go ahead and do that. And it'll put the hourglass up for a little while if you have virtually no files like I do, or a longer while if you have a bunch. And you'll see it brings in the exact same thing it did before, but it's going to look a little bit different. Notice here, when I brought in the one file, it just has a straight reference YJPG. Here, it put in my entire directory structure in front of it. But it turns out it's the same thing, so let's copy that name because I don't really want to type that. Go out to root UI and go back to rendering, and we'll change our reference from this to that. Hit Control S, and now we'll hit refresh on this, and you'll notice that it still works. So everything comes in exactly the same way. So there are a couple of different ways you can approach bringing media resources, images, MP3 files, MP4 files, Windows media files, what have you in, you can either put in direct URL references as I showed you, or you can build a file library and bring them in that way. And the latter has some advantages and disadvantages. The former, of course, has advantages and disadvantages. It all depends on what problem you're trying to solve and how you want to solve it. We'll leave it there for today. And next time we'll go over static file references and how to add those into your application. And the example we're going to use is to make the title for each blog post into a link that goes back to that blog post, basically a perma URL. So until next time, have fun with Smalltalk.